Well, thank you, and amazing stuff. I do want to say something. Hero Devs did a really cool, fun video from DrupalCon that you should check out because it was pretty hilarious. I decided to do something a little different for this keynote. I wanted to shake it up a little bit, stretch myself, and just have something a little more fun. So we're going to talk about bricks to bits, how Lego's reinvention can inspire Drupal's digital transformation. All right, hello, I'm Kristen, and I'm a quant co-founder, among other things. I won't go into much detail. We talked about the amazing sponsors. Thank you all. I will be also giving away free Lego. I have a whole box. I will be giving them away tomorrow as a carrot. I have a bunch of different Lego. So stay around tomorrow, and if you are interested in getting, I'm going to have a raffle. I have these cards. See me, I'll give you a card, and we can get you in the raffle to get some Lego to take home. All right, I didn't write this book. I read a book, and it was actually really interesting. Now, this book was published about 10 years ago, but actually there's a lot of relevant stuff in here, and it was actually a really fun read. So I highly recommend it if anyone is interested. I want to give credit to using Starshot branded slides, Drupal branding. Want to give credit there. I also want to shout out to Salsa Digital, who sponsored my Starshot Advisory Council and my work on the Starshot demo design system, along with the civic theme product team. So I really appreciate that sponsorship to do that work. And a little surprise at the end, hopefully we have time, from Aaron and Gabe. Okay, so why Lego? I think when people ask about Drupal, it's a pretty common thing to say, oh, well, Drupal's like Lego, right? You use it to build whatever you want. And that's the fun and exciting thing about Drupal and about Lego. What's interesting is when I started trying to figure out what to do for this talk, I didn't know that Lego almost went out of business. They actually who here in the room actually knew this? Okay, so there's a few, some hardcore Lego fans in the room. I had no idea. They almost went bankrupt in 2003. And so I thought, oh, this is kind of interesting, and I wanted to understand this more, and I read the book, and there's some fun things that I found out. So the company principles, I think, are actually pretty well aligned to the Drupal open source project and the Drupal community. So their principles are around values, innovation, building systems, discipline, authenticity, and serving the customer. So I think those really resonate well with the Drupal project as well. So what I also didn't know is Lego has been around a long time. They started in the 30s with wooden toys, like ducks and stuff. And there's actually a story that the owner's son decided to take a shortcut and only to put 2 coats of varnish on top of a duck, and took it off to the train station to get delivered. The owner was so mad that he had the son go back, get those ducks, stay up all night, put the varnish back, the 3rd coat of varnish back on, because that was not going to fly in his book. So I thought that was really interesting, that, definitely that kind of discipline and that, only the best is good enough sort of mentality was from the beginning. So, they were popular with various things. They started to get into plastic in the 40s. They bought a machine to do the molding, and the owner wanted to buy 2 machines, but they said, no, you could only have one so that he could tinker around. And they did a lot of different experimentation. So when you think of Lego, you think of the brick, right? That's like, what else would you think of? I mean, there's a lot of other things, cool things they do, but that's really the foundation of Lego and kind of what they've built. So the interesting thing about the brick is it actually took about 12 years for them to perfect that system, because it wasn't easy. The first bricks that they did, you would stack them up and they would fall over. So it took many years of experimentation and tweaking and fine-tuning until they got actually something they call clutch power, where you can click it It stays, you can build, but you can pop it off. So, and then the idea of like the system, the building system of being able to interchange these pieces and use them across different sets. So before the 70s, Lego did fine. They had growth, but it was fairly minimal. It was sort of chugging along, they were doing good things, but it wasn't like really taking off. And it wasn't until the 70s that they kind of figured out, oh, we know how to like take this to the next level. And they really leaned into this system of play, this interchangeability between the different pieces and being able to leverage different sets together. They added an element of role playing, and they also started to do these themed sets. So, the minifig. The minifig is something that was very, very game-changing with Lego. It was introduced in 1978, like this little cute guy here, little astronaut. And before that time, they had Lego actually had sets for like towns and houses and buildings and all that. They had no people. It wasn't until 1978 that actually had a little person. And then the kids loved it because then they could be like little people and interact with the environment. So that was a new thing for them in the 70s, which really was a big deal. And the other thing was these theme sets, which just really took off. They had pirates and of course Star Wars and castles and just all this sort of stuff that was just really capturing the imagination of the kids. Come the 90s, things started getting a little messy. The company itself was kind of getting a bit slow. They kind of weren't really sure what they were supposed to do in the marketplace anymore. They didn't really have as many hits as they used to. Now, sure, Star Wars was a big hit, but the funny thing is, the execs at Lego didn't actually want to license Star Wars. The VP at the time actually said, over my dead body, will we have a Lego Star Wars? So fortunately, and that was actually the sentiment in all of the headquarters. Fortunately, the team in the US was really gunning for this, and they're like, no, you really need to do it. And they were able to convince it. If they hadn't have done that, I think there's a strong possibility that Lego would not be here today, because the Star Wars themed Lego was actually one of the things that saved them in the 90s. Along with that, Mindstorms. Mindstorms was a big hit, just building robotic sets, different robots and stuff with Mindstorms was a huge, huge thing. But they had a lot of dents, actually. So if you look at the names, Primo, Rock Crater, okay, we know Winnie the Pooh, right? But, it was a little bit muddied at the time. So one of the reasons that things were getting challenging is the patent for Lego, the brick itself, actually expired in 1988. So there were actually companies that were trying to do the brick before then, and of course Lego was suing them, not always successfully, but after it exploded. I'm sure people have seen Mega Bloks and Tyco, and there's this Korean one, Oxford or something, that had all these clones, right? And they're all interchangeable. So if you had some Lego, you could buy some of these other things. And so it was a bit of the Wild West in terms of competition in this space. But the other thing going on in the 90s was it was actually pretty fun to be a kid back then, right? Video games, we got dial-up, we got gadgets, we have all sorts of fun stuff, right? So it was hard to compete with this new world for these kids. There was a lot going on, and they didn't, Lego didn't really know how to compete in this new space. Well, as a result, in 98, they had the first loss for the company, which was about, I think, $40 million, which was a big deal because they had always been, profitable or kind of, chugging along and doing pretty well. I mean, sometimes plateauing, but they had never had such a significant loss. As a result, they decided, okay, we have to do something. Like, we don't know what we're doing. The space is weird. There's a lot going on. Do people want Lego anymore? Or are they just too distracted by all these video games? And they said, okay, we're going to hire a new CEO. And so before that, it was the owner had been the CEO. We're going to hire a new CEO. And they found this guy from Bang & Olufsen who was called the Miracle Man. He was basically, he could, get you back on track, which he had a history of doing. So they're like, okay, cool. We're going to bring in the Miracle Man and see what can happen. So the Miracle Man came in, and boy, did they do a lot. They did all sorts of stuff. They were all over the place. They had TV shows. They licensed the Spielberg's name, and they did a movie maker with a camera and some crappy software, and so that the kids could try to actually make a movie. They spent a lot of money and years developing a 3D rendering software where everything was super realistic, and you could build all this Lego stuff within the software. That one's called Darwin. They went a little nuts. They made more Legolands. They added a gazillion stores. They were just like all over the place and doing all sorts of interesting things. So a lot of these things didn't really make a lot of sense. Like, they weren't necessarily like doing research and deciding, is this what the customers want? They were just like flooding the market with Lego whatever and seeing what was going to stick. Well, that didn't go too well. They had a huge loss, 30% of sales down the tubes in a very short period of time. So the Miracle Man didn't really have the right touch here. And they were $800 million in debt. And they weren't even sure if they would be able to continue at that point. So there was basically this feeling like, I don't know if we're going to be around in 2004. Not sure. Company is just really going down tubes. And what are we going to do? So, well, first thing was to boot the Miracle Man, because obviously that wasn't working out. That was so well received in the company, for those that were there, that because they had called him Dr. Death. They actually made they had made a Photoshop, I guess Photoshop was back then, Photoshop picture, because the CEO was going to be the owner again, which was Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, which was very telling of like, okay, out with this guy, this is no good. Let's get back and try to, make it happen. So first thing the CEO did is he had actually two sidekicks that were very instrumental in bringing back the Lego brand. And one was fairly new to the company. Well, actually, they were both fairly new to the company. One was a little bit more green, and the other one was more of a veteran in the industry. But they said, okay, how did this happen? Like, that is a huge catastrophic loss. How did we get there? That's just crazy. Like, what is going on here? So they dug deep, and they started to find some interesting facts. One, 94% of Lego sets were unprofitable. You can't have a business if 94% of your Lego sets are unprofitable. Like, right, that's just not going to happen. So that's a pretty big deal. They also found that 90% of new elements that were introduced were used only once. Now, the problem with that is this is manufacturing, right? Whenever you can use something again and again, you're going to get a lot more, cost savings. You use something once, and they were saying at the time, a unique element like the Raiders of the Lost, the whip, okay? That's an awesome element. We want to keep that one, right? But there's certain ones you want to keep. it's going to be like $1 per set. But all the other ones that, are on many, many sets, we're talking pennies, right? So it can, you have a $10 set, and you have a $1 piece, that starts to add up. So this was definitely something that they had to keep in mind. Another thing is internally, it was the Wild West. Each product team was just doing their own thing. They weren't following the same process. If they had a process, they were just all over the place, and it was very, very chaotic. Another very interesting fact they found was, I see you. All right, adult fans, let's hear it. Adult fans. Okay, we've got a good number in the room. Outspent families 20-1. And they had no idea. They had no idea. They just were clueless. So like the Mindstorms, they just didn't even know. In fact, they didn't even put much marketing effort into Mindstorms. Just the community was just into it, they're doing it. They were just like, okay, cool, we'll crank them out and have fun over there. So yeah, they were quite clueless. So what went wrong? Nearly everything went wrong. The culture, even historically, was very insular, so they weren't really wanting to look outside. It was all about, what are we doing inside? And then even just inside, they were very specific. Each team was kind of doing their own thing and not really paying attention to like the big picture. Their accounting software obviously sucked because they had no idea what was profitable, what wasn't profitable, what was going on. They were just completely out to lunch. They were doing too much too fast, especially in that big burst of the Miracle Man. And just, no oversight or feedback. A big part of it is during that time when they were trying to recover from the 98 blip, was they switched their target customer. They said, oh, well, kids don't like to build anymore. They're too busy. They want to play video games. So they decided they're going to switch from builders to non-builders. Lego. Like, what? Who does, why? It didn't make any sense. And the numbers showed it didn't make any sense. And they were trying to do all these crazy things that were catering to more of the non-builders, which alienated the fan base, right? People were not happy, especially the adults. They were competing with retailers. They had all these stores that they had put all over the place, and the retailers were like, well, what about us? How are we supposed to sell things? And they had a lot of, they didn't really understand the spaces that they were operating in, the software space and the television space and all these, different things. They were just like all over the place, out of their expertise. Another interesting thing is they stamped down dissent. So one of the things was they had this beloved Drupal brand, which is for little kids. I think I saw there was a little kid earlier, like toddlers, right? Very beloved brand. They're like, no, we're going to throw that out, and we're going to replace it with electronic toys because, hey, it's the 90s and the early 2000s. The kids want to do that kind of stuff. That was a big flaw. So there were some execs that were like, no, this is not a good idea. We don't agree. They said, you know what? Either accept it or you can leave. So that was definitely sort of the climate back then when they were working with the Miracle Man. And they just refused to learn from mistakes. They had already made mistakes in the past, but they just weren't examining them and looking at them. So the CEO, along with his two sidekicks, decided, okay, we need some sort of recovery plan. This is roughly taken from the book. First off is survive, right? They were dying. They had to just do some very drastic measures. They had to fire a lot of people. They had to strip down and get rid of lots of products and stuff. So, that was not a fun time, obviously. But then they had to start saying, okay, well, what is profitable? And let's do some analysis. Let's clean up our structure, our processes, and try to, get back on track. And that set them up to be able to do the growth phase and have a bit more fun and actually be innovative, but in a smart way. So what went right? At this time, most everything. Like they were really dialed in. Like they were really fighting for their life at this point. So the county system got completely overhauled, so they knew exactly real time what was going on with all of their profitability. They implemented a universal development process so that all the teams were actually on the same page and following the same rules, and checkpoints and gates and all that. They started to focus back on the key products and on the builder again. Like, why were they creating products for non-builders? It did not make any sense, right? And then they started tapping into these hardcore fans who are in this room, right? Of like, okay, how can we leverage you guys? Because this would be pretty cool. And started co-creating with the community. I'll actually talk a little bit more about that in a second. Talked with retailers again. An interesting side note was that at the very beginning, back in the 40s, they had talked to a retailer who was like, oh, I really want products instead of all these independent products. Something that was more integrated that you could use with different system, thus the building system. So really, the building system of Lego came from a retailer saying, hey, I have a need, I see this need, I want someone to fulfill it, and then they went and did it. They found strategic partners, they started actually testing and making sure things were, something that someone would want to use before releasing it. Much more inclusive of feedback and, looking at what's going wrong and trying to course correct. So I want to talk a little bit about this customer co-creation because I think it's pretty interesting. And in the book, they talk about different ways that we can co-create with our customers or our community. And one was the power of one. And I found this pretty interesting. So who here has seen the architecture series of Lego, where you can do like iconic buildings and stuff? Probably seen them even in passing this at a museum, store or something like that, or maybe a higher end store where you can build, the Sears Tower, or Falling Water is a very iconic one from Frank Lloyd Wright, if I got that right. Well, it's interesting because that idea and actually the prototyping came out of someone who was not in Lego. He was a hardcore Lego fan. He was an architect, very into all of this. He went to a store, he bought 13 carts of Lego and took them home, and he just started building stuff. And he was just really fascinated with what you could do with Lego. So he built all these cool buildings, and he ended up talking with an exec at some, fan convention or something about how he was doing this, and he thought, oh, it might be fun for other, people to be able to do something similar. And the guy's like, oh, well, that's an interesting idea. Okay, let me know how that goes. And so he goes back and he does prototypes and eventually miniaturizes this into something that's, pretty cool. He makes a little kit. He goes back and says to the exec, hey, I want to show you something. He showed it to him, and he's like, oh, that looks pretty cool. Okay, well, we will manufacture the parts and do the shipping, but that's it. The rest is on you. So they shipped a bunch of Lego parts, this guy's garage, and him and his wife figured out the packaging, bundled them up, and made, I think, 500 or 1,000 of these little kits, took them to some specialty stores. They flew off the shelves. And so they're like, oh, okay. And so they did another pilot, bigger set, again, just sold out, and they realized, oh, we have something here. So they decided to run with it and pull that product in-house. So that's the power of one. The next story I'll talk about is with the Mindstorms community. So Mindstorms, like I mentioned, they weren't really giving them a lot of love. They were making the Mindstorms pieces and selling them, but they weren't really marketing to them. They weren't really engaging with the community. But in this sort of phase where they were really trying to connect and understand what the market wanted, they started going to these tournaments and things where you have thousands of people competing, and they're making all these inventions, and they were just like, wow, this is amazing. There were people making operating systems for Mindstorms for them, for free, and open sourcing it, right? So they really were like, okay, how do we tap into this? What they did is they saw, in the forums, okay, who are the movers and shakers? Who are the leaders in this space? And they actually invited 5 of them, 4 of them decided to do it, to volunteer their time. Who would do that? And basically integrated them into their product team. They were basically invited to come and make the next generation of Mindstorms. So they leveraged those experts in the field, those influencers, as you will, right, to be able to figure out like what could we do, what could we make this even better for the next iteration. So definitely something that actually do pretty well here in the Drupal community, but I think is a good example. The last one, or the third one is being able to watch and learn. So they haven't been doing a lot of testing, like user testing or any of that until this phase, and they're like, okay, they started recruiting kids with the parents' permission to do kid testing, and they had these kids, and they would do like like a whiteboard and show them like ideas and kind of get engaged of what kind of response they were getting. Or they would have early prototypes, and they would do a one-way mirror and then just let them do their thing and stay back and just kind of interact with that. So they were able to get a lot more information. I mean, the kids wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, I want this feature, this feature, this feature, but they could see how they were interacting with the product and then say, oh, this one needs I don't know, maybe we don't want to move forward with this because they're just really bored. Or, oh, yeah, they're really engaged with this. Let's iterate on this and see if we can take it even further. And the last example I'll do is the leverage of the crowd. So like the crowdsourcing kind of idea, right? So one of the things is they have ideas Lego, where you could go and you show ideas, and that's a pretty cool space. So there's a Lego Designer, I think it's called, where you can go and you can make your own Lego kit, and then you can actually print it, or have it created and then shipped to you. And then others can actually also have it manufactured as well, and they can get a copy. But what was interesting about this is there was one that was so successful, like so many people had been, buying this particular, community-created set that Lego licensed it from the creator and decided to manufacture it itself. I think that was a blacksmith shop. So these are some interesting ways that Lego started to work with its customers and its communities. So in the recovery period, they, for about a decade, they had lots of hits. They understood their profitability. They cut stuff as fast as it was like, no, this is not working. They were doing their user testing. They had just, really figured out and fine-tuned their processes and, the formulas and working with the community in order to figure out like what was actually working for them. So they just had, a really amazing, they were just very, very effective. And it showed. So they not only survived and got back to profitability, but they basically went off the charts. So they had, of course, this is only going to maybe around 2014, and they've been doing quite well since then. But they had figured out a winning formula. So wait, but we're at BADCamp. Why are we talking about Lego? We always are looking, how can we make Drupal better? I mean, we're all here. I personally love Drupal. I'm sure most of you love Drupal too, have been around the community a long time. And like, how can we make it easier for people, get more people involved, make it more sustainable, all of these fun things. So I felt like there was some strong parallels there. And we've seen this curve, right? The experts in the room, which there's a number of us, we love it, we get it. Beginner, I don't know. Maybe not so much, right? They struggle, they're not sure, it's not so easy to set up and to run with, right? And I'm sure we've seen some of these curves, right? Like usage has been dying off for a while, right? And it doesn't mean that the total market, the money has died. It's actually been fairly strong, but it's not upmarket, right? We've got more enterprise with big government, things like that. So, you know, we used to be small sites, right? I started 20 years ago, 2004, right? So it was a little hobbyist site and whatever, tinkering around, and a lot of us probably started there, right? So we have gone up market, but we've sort of lost kind of, you know, we sort of switched our customer base a little bit. But Drupal CMS, aka Starshot, was announced earlier this year as, you know, making the next version of Drupal in order to make it easier for site builders to build sites, but also for marketers and content creators to be able to make content easily and nice content as well. So I want to take some of the lessons learned from the Lego story and try to weave that back in of like, what are the things that we should be thinking about for Starshot or in, you know, bring it back to your business or whatever. But basically, you know, there's a big, strong customer component, right? We want to nurture the fans. We want to be excited about Drupal and contributing to cool things. We need to understand the users. Even if we're trying to capture new users, that makes sense. Not the non-builder, but, you know, okay, the marketer, maybe we haven't really been helping them as much as we could, but we need to understand them better. And then convincing the stakeholders, like, why should the chief marketing officer want to use Drupal? Why should the IT director want to use Drupal? Be data-driven. So this really bit Lego in the butt, right? They were not paying attention. They had, you know, they weren't keeping track of what was going on. So having measuring those results, knowing what's working, what's not, being willing to let go the stuff that's not working, seeking out critics, making sure, you know, critics aren't always correct, but it's still good to understand their point of view, and you still might get something out of it. Even if you don't agree with them, you still might get something out of it. And then creating those kind of feedback loops. Being disciplined. So they had gone to the Wild West in terms of, you know, under Dr. Death. You know, you want to make sure people know what is their North Star. What are they doing? Like, and why? Why are they doing this? Is this actually important, or is this noise? And just being willing to just review and course correct and just be smart about, you know, how you move forward. Be collaborative. I think we're very good at this. You know, building a product team that has many skills, many points of view, understanding different you know, ways that Drupal is being used, involving the community, which is definitely something we do very well, and creating strategic partnerships. Now those partnerships could be within the Drupal community, or it can be outside. So I think it's important for us not to be so myopic and so insular that we're only thinking outside, and we are actually trying to go beyond Drupal. We're good at this. Be innovative, right? We're good at innovation, right? Finding new ways of doing things, trying to tap into experts, again, outside of Drupal, like try to pull in people that know about things that we don't necessarily, maybe are not in our wheelhouse, and exploring those new markets of like, okay, if we want to be top-notch for the marketing teams, like how do we get into those spaces? And lastly, be strategic. So don't do everything. You know, Dr. Death was trying to do all the things, all the spaces, crazy stuff, right? So you want to be smart about, you know, you've only got so much time and energy and people, you want to be effective. And then that simplifying we're using, right? They had all these special components and special things, like how can you reuse and simplify and you know, use economies of scale and learn from failure. So as we already talked about, and I'm sure you've seen in the Dries node or whatever, we're working on a lot of cool things with Drupal CMS. We got automatic updates, experience builder, recipes, project hours. This talk is not to go into all the intricacies of all of this stuff. There's plenty of great sessions that go into that. I just want to highlight that, those are the big buckets, but there's also a lot of supporting work, right? Drupal 11, the core teams have been knocking it out of the park, doing amazing things. The new brand that was released recently, so the marketing and UX folks are doing amazing things. The Drupal.org site is getting revamped, and there's a lot. The Promote Drupal initiative's been just knocking it out of the park. I helped work on the Starshot down the design system, which supported Experience Builder, and that was part of the Barcelona keynote. So yeah, there's a lot going on. So I'm going to tie it a little bit back into the stuff that we were just talking about. So these are things that I feel like we're doing right and are actively working on. For the customers, we're interviewing marketing people. What do you want? Like, what works for you? What doesn't work for you? We're doing community surveys. We have issues where we're asking for feedback. If you want to go and give feedback on the new Drupal brand, the Drupal.home, the new homepage, new.drupal.org, and there's an issue you can comment on and say, yeah, I like it, I don't like it, whatever. We're trying to promote not only internally but outside. We're going to conferences outside of Drupal and trying to reach new people. On the innovation front, we are knocking it out of the park. We got all sorts of fun stuff going on. We've got AI-driven things that are very exciting. The experience builder stuff with React is just amazing. We've got all this recipes sort of ecosystem that's building on top of a base recipe. I mean, on and on and on. Like, we really are nailing it. Collaboration. The organization and collaboration has just been phenomenal. They have work tracks to work on these different, they're mostly recipes, but there's some other things as well, to get new features into the Starshot work. We've got cross-functional teams, we've got UX folks and design and engineering and marketing. We're all working together and making sure that we coordinate. We're integrating Drupal certified partners into this, where the DA has been amazing about pairing different work tracks with Drupal certified partners so that they can try to just run with it, and then the leadership team, along with the DA, has just been very, very disciplined and strategic, and overseeing all the things that are going on. And course correcting as needed, right? I mean, we have to continually look at those milestones like, is that realistic? Well, asterisk on the realistic, but keep course correcting and okay, this is going to make it, this isn't going to make it, and be smart about that. As for data-driven, I mentioned I'm on the Starshot Council. I'm not wearing that hat. I'm just one of everybody here. But user research, we're doing these reviews regularly. And an interesting thing on strategy is we are doing something totally different in terms of product development. We've never done this before, right? Core has had a very rigorous development process for good reason. And that is very important, like the security, the core gates, and all that. Very, very solid core, which is awesome. The strategy for this product, for this Drupal CMS, is to go fast and iterate and figure out what's working and what's not, and just move. So it's very, very cool. Coming soon. There's more stuff coming soon. I know we're getting out of time, but there's the most important thing I haven't even gotten to yet. So, how to get involved. There's the Starshot landing page if you haven't seen it. There's the Drupal CMS project. There's the Starshot Summit tomorrow. But the most important thing.
My website sucks. Easy way to make a fast, functional, and appealing website.
I have come to save you.
amazing. Thank you so much. What's your name?
My name is Drupal CMS.
I know we're out of time. I just want to thank Aaron Deutsch and Gabe Woodward for that amazing video, and thank you for coming. I will be around. Pull me aside. I'll have the cards. I don't know the cards, but you know, to enter the Lego raffle. I don't think, we don't really have time for questions, but pull me aside, ask me questions, and have an amazing BADCamp.